or a few Jewish children. I spent 22 days at the hospital. Those days changed my life. Those days changed the way I believe information. I watched television. I listened to the radio, because I realized I was fed a fabricated lie about the Jews and about Israel that was so far from reality. I realized that it was my culture that taught hate. It was my culture that was unable to love and show compassion to their enemy in their time of need, the way the Israelis were able to show compassion to the Palestinians, to the Muslims, to the Lebanese at their time of need. And I realized the difference in values and character between the Arabic society and the Israeli society. And that's basically where the problem stems from. It's a difference in values.
Well, then what happened after your mother finished her treatment in the hospital?
When my mother finished her treatment in the hospital, we had to go back to Lebanon. I was delighted to be back because I missed my father so much. We had been gone for a while. But it was a double-edged sword because I did not want to go back to Lebanon. And the minute we crossed the border, I felt I am crossing back into the gates of hell. And I didn't want to cross. And I remember grabbing onto the barbed wire to the point where it cut the palm of my hand. I was bleeding, telling my mother, crying, please don't take me out of here. I do not want to go back into Lebanon. And she looked at my face and she said, and who's going to take care of me and your dad? I was an only child. And I didn't know what to tell her. I had to go back to Lebanon. And I felt I was being sentenced back to hell. I went into depression. I was very depressed. I didn't want to leave the house. I stayed home. All I thought about was my days in the hospital. Because I left my heart in Israel. I left my heart with people who taught me humanity, who taught me respect for humanity, respect for human life. I was able to see a side to the Israelis that I know for a fact did not exist where I come from. They had respect for humanity that I didn't know of until I went to Israel. They had compassion. They had values. They had principles that were foreign in my culture. I was so depressed, and I vowed that one day I will be back to Israel, because those are the type of people I want to be like. These are the type of characters I want to adopt. And I ended up going back to Israel 3 years later to work in Jerusalem.
Well, then how did you get back to Israel?
I got a job working as news anchor for World News Tonight in Jerusalem. And it was a dream come true. I never, beyond my wildest dream, ever thought that I will be able to go work in Israel in such a profession that gave me the ability to meet world leaders and be exposed to information and be able to judge information that was not filtered through the Arabic filters and through the Arabic propaganda. I was able to make decisions and learn about situations in the world where I can evaluate and form an opinion, my own opinion, based on factual information without the exaggeration and the propaganda of the Arabs. It also gave me an insight into the Palestinian culture and into the Israeli culture, because Jerusalem is the pinnacle of East meets West. In Jerusalem, you have the western side of the city where the Jewish people live, and you have the eastern side of the city where the Arabs live. And the contrast is blinding. It really shows you the difference in the culture and in the values of the two people. It also taught me about the exaggeration of the media, the Arabic media, and what truly was happening in the territories. We had friends in Bethlehem, and we would go visit our friends in Bethlehem. And our friends were Christians. And it got to the point where the Christians were afraid for their lives because they were so intimidated by the Muslims, by the Palestinian Muslims. The Palestinian Muslims would go into Christian cemeteries. They would break the crosses. They would dig the bodies. And when we would do interviews with these Christians, we had to disguise their face because their life was threatened just because they were telling the truth. Because if their Muslim neighbors ever found out that they're speaking about what they're being subjected to, they would be killed. The intimidation and the death threats were unbelievable. in the old city of Jerusalem when I was working as a news anchor. And the Christian quarter, a few Christian girls were walking back from Catholic school, dressed in the Catholic uniform. And there were a few incidences where Muslim Palestinian students would throw acid on the Christian girls' faces. A couple girls were deformed because of acids and had to be taken into Israeli hospitals. I was able to see the Israeli side that always believes the best, hopes for peace, teach their children that one day we're going to have peace with the Palestinians. One day we're going to have peace with our Arab neighbors, and we're going to do everything we can to achieve that peace. Yet you would go visit the Palestinians, and the Palestinians teach their children, one day we're going to kill all the Jews and drive them into the sea. I saw nothing but two faces. One, a face of hate and evil, and one, a face of love and compassion. And that's what the situation is between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Well, what sort of danger did you face from Islamic terror organizations while you were in Israel?
I was very worried for my life because in the Middle East, when you speak the truth, when you report honestly about the facts and what's going on, your life gets threatened. Because if the Palestinian media cannot control what you're saying, if the Arabic government cannot control what you're saying, you are a major threat to them because you are informing the population of what is truly happening. And that's what I did when I worked for Middle East television. They tried to assassinate me in Lebanon. They tried to shoot at me one day when I was walking home. They thought I was dead. I played dead in a ditch until they left, and then I crawled home. They chased me in Israel twice. I was chased for 2 hours, one time between Tel Aviv and Haifa. I traveled wearing different wigs so people would not recognize who I am. I would always disguise my appearance. People in America do not realize that here in this country, we can voice our opinion. We can even cuss the president on national television. And we never ever have to fear for our lives because we have freedom of press, freedom of speech. In the Middle East, there is no such thing. There is no freedom of press. If you go against the tide, if you go against what you're told to say, you are a threat and you will be killed. There have been many incidences of journalists in the Middle East being shot, being killed, losing their jobs, and especially now it's a well-known tactic on the Palestinian territories. You report what comes out of Yasser Arafat. You do not go against the Palestinian media or you will be killed. And the tactics they're using right now is they're accusing reporters of being traitors, of being informant to the Israeli army, and they're killing them publicly because that's the accusation that they're sticking on them instead of them saying, well, he's not listening to what we want him to report, and therefore that's why we killed him. Hezbollah published my picture in the Hezbollah magazine in Lebanon, along with the Israelis news anchor for Mabat, the evening news, calling me a traitor, asking that I should be killed, calling me an Israeli informant, an Israeli spy. It was very dangerous for me to even travel within the security zone inside Lebanon.
Well, I understand you buried both of your parents in Jerusalem. What was your motivation for doing something like that?
Before I left Israel and came to the States, I wanted to make sure both my parents were buried in Israel. My father was living with me at the time when he died, and I buried him in Jerusalem on Mount Zion. But my mother had died a year and a half earlier. So before I came to the States, I went back to her grave, dug her out of her grave, took her out of her casket, put her in another casket in my car, and drove her to Israel and buried her with my father. Because I wanted to ensure that my children, yet unborn, will always know where my loyalty lies and will always be drawn to Israel. I believe actions speak louder than words. People can say anything. It's their actions that tell you exactly where they stand. And that's why I buried my parents on Mount Zion. If you are ever in Jerusalem and you are visiting the Oskar Schindler Cemetery, you would be passing by my parents' grave on your way to his tomb.
Do you think if the Israelis gave back the West Bank and Gaza, there would be peace?
No, it's not Gaza and the West Bank. Israel could give them Gaza and the West Bank, but the Palestinians want it all, not only Gaza and the West Bank. People need to realize when the PLO was formed in 1964, Gaza was illegally invaded and occupied by Egypt, and the West Bank was illegally invaded and occupied by Jordan. When the PLO was formed in 1964, it wasn't Gaza and the West Bank that Yasser Arafat was fighting to get. It was Israel proper that Yasser Arafat wanted. Today in the Palestinian Authority, under the Palestinian Authority, in the Palestinian schools, when you see maps of Palestine, Israel doesn't exist. It shows the whole area as the map of Palestine. They want the whole land. They do not want Israel to exist in the Middle East. Israel has no place in the Middle East. They do not want any Jews living in Arabic territories. You look at Israel. Israel has Muslim Israeli citizens. They have Muslim in parliament in the Knesset. Show me one Arabic country in the world that has a Jew in its government. The Arabs hate the Jews, and they do not want the Jews in the Middle East. The Jews don't have a place in the Middle East. And no, Israel can give Gaza and can give back the West Bank to the Palestinians. It's not going to be enough, and it's not going to be peace, and they're going to be fighting to get more and more and more.
Well, what do you think about the Palestinian leadership?
I think the Palestinian leadership is corrupt. The Palestinian leadership is the cancer that is killing the Palestinians. If the Palestinian leaders cared about the Palestinian people, the least they can do is take those millions and millions of dollars that have poured into the Palestinian territories ever since the Palestinian Authority came into power in 1995. Millions of dollars have poured from the United States, from the European Union into the Palestinian territories, and went into the pockets of Yasser Arafat and his cronies, while the Palestinians are still living in refugee camps under their own leadership. There is no other group in the world, no other group of people in the world live under their own leadership in refugee camps like rats, without dignity. They live on top of each other. The least the Palestinian leaders, if they care about their people, would take some of the money that's been allocated to improve the Palestinian territories and at least build townhomes for them. Let them live in dignity. Let them go to the bathroom in decent bathrooms. Let them live with respect. But instead, the Palestinian leadership pockets the money. It goes for bribery, for driving the Mercedeses, for driving the BMW, for fancy vacations, for fancy homes. Abu Mazen has a $1.5 million home in Gaza. How many Palestinians that live in Gaza live in a $1.5 million home? The Palestinians need to wake up and kick their leaders out. And it needs to come from them. The world cannot do it for them. They need to wake up and stop buying the lies. They need to realize they are being used as puppets in the hands of a corrupt leadership. And they need to kick that leadership out and start negotiating with the Israelis. Because if they would have accepted the Israelis' plan in 2000, when Barak offered them a plan that was irrefusable, if they would have accepted that plan, they would have had 97% of the territories right now. Gaza would be 100% under Palestinian leadership. And they even turned that down. Yasser Arafat does not want peace with the Israelis. And it's time the Palestinians kick him out, choose a new leader. And it's the duty of all Palestinians. I urge all Palestinians worldwide. There are Palestinians who are educated, that live in England, that live in Australia. It needs to come as a worldwide movement to kick the leadership out from the Palestinian territories and start negotiating with Israel if they want peace.
How would you describe how the Palestinians are using the Europeans and the West to further their own goals?
The Palestinians learned to manipulate the media. They know how to play the West like a violin. We in the United States, because we have no point of reference to positioning, for example, leaders, military leaders, and cannons amongst civilians in a war state. So when the Israelis, for example, are going after Hamas leaders, those Hamas leaders are changing position every night and every other night, and they are hiding among Palestinian civilians. They are basically killing their own people. But when you watch the news at night and you realize that when Israel kills a Hamas leader, other 14 people are dead, some of them are children, the West thinks, oh my gosh, Israel is doing a horrible thing here, they're killing the children. They need to realize that these leaders are hiding amongst these children. That's what's killing their own people. The West does not understand how the Middle East think, which is shocking to me when they go invest so much time and energy understanding, for example, how to do business with the Japanese. They learn Japanese culture. They learn this is the effective way to deal with Japan, and you learn these customs. And here we are in a state of war. We are fighting a holy war that's been declared on Jews and Christians worldwide. Yet in this country, we are burying our head in the sand in the United States. And you have organizations such as Duke universities, which is supposed to be an intellectual place where people come to learn and be tolerant about each other and learn about different cultures and different ideas. Yet a university like Duke would allow a hate fest, basically, where people can stand up there and spew hate towards the Jews and say, oh, the Jews need to be killed. We feel sorry for the Jews. How can we allow such talk? If I, as an American citizen, get on television or organize a rally at a university campus and say, all gays need to be killed because all gays are terrible and we need to annihilate them. Would I survive a day? I'll be thrown in prison. I will be sued. How come we have such double standards towards issues? How come we allow the Palestinians to say, we do not want to condemn violence because it's irrelevant. It's not going to do anything. How can we accept that? You're looking at hundreds of Muhammad Attas in the making who believe in suicide bombing, who believe in terrorism, who basically in a way are supporting terrorism indirectly. Because when you refuse to condemn the suicide bombers and terrorism and violence, your hands are soiled with the blood of the innocents just as much as any suicide bomber who blows himself up. The innocent's blood is on your hand. And this is what people need to realize. These conventions are nothing but a hate fest towards the Jews. Simple. And not only the Jews, also towards America. And we need to wake up.
As an American, why do you think the Middle East is an important matter for all Americans?
The Middle East should be the utmost important matter to all Americans at this point, especially after 9/11. For the last 20 years, Americans have not paid attention to what's been going on around the world. The terrorist attacks around the world, all the terrorist organizations that we're dealing with today, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Islamic Jihad. Where do you think Islamic Jihad came from? Where do you think Hamas came from? To focus only on Al-Qaeda is a fatal error. Al-Qaeda is a transnational organization made up of a merging of different groups together under Al-Qaeda. We have proved that Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah have established linkages with Al-Qaeda in the United States. And of all terrorist organizations in the United States, Hamas has the largest American infrastructure. Hamas is not an Israeli problem. Hamas is a United States problem. Hamas is a world problem. What people in American society need to understand that Hamas and its leaders, the leader that Israel killed, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, is the guy who wrote the Hamas Charter. If Americans would read the Hamas Charter, Article 22 of the Hamas Charter mentions the Lions Club as a terrorist organization to be destroyed, as secret organizations to be destroyed. The Lions Clubs, the Rotary Clubs, the Freemasons, the Bnei B'rith and the likes, such as the Kiwanis. How many Lion Club members in the United States know they are mentioned in the Hamas Charter? If Americans think Hamas is over there, it's Israel's problem, that's all in the Middle East, let's leave them all behind and focus on the United States, they are mistaken. Hamas has chapters in 40 states in the United States. And that's what America needs to wake up and start learning about.
Since you've become active speaking out about Israel, what do you think about Jewish opinions towards the Palestinian situation?
This is a great question. It saddens me to see the difference between the Jews and the way they handle the Palestinian situation and the Palestinians and how they handle speeches about the Israelis and the Jews. When I was asked to speak at Duke, I was instructed by Hillel, which is the organization that sponsored my speaking, to respect the Palestinians, don't say bad things about the Palestinians, don't say anything derogatory about the Palestinians nor the Muslims, nor their hate teachings, don't point the finger at anyone, just speak about terrorism in general, because we want to create awareness. They actually even have a concert because to keep the mood light. And you contrast that with the Palestinians on campus, who are basically on the other side of the campus, spewing hate. The hatred that comes across in their speeches is absolutely unacceptable. And the sad reality is that this is the same type of signs that we started seeing before World War II. It's the sign of hate verbiage that Hitler used to say about the Jews before World War II, before he started killing them. And the Jews did not believe it back then. And they always hoped for the best. And now, as a third party, I look at the two of them from a distance, and I see it's the same thing is happening again. The Palestinian solidarity movement at Duke, at the convention, refused to condemn violence, refused to condemn suicide bombers.
Brigitte, how can people contact you and your organization? And what can the average person do to stop evil from proliferating?
People can contact me through American Congress for Truth. The web address is americancongressfortruth.com, or they can call at 757-715-1213. And I look forward to hearing everyone's input and everyone's email about this interview. The average American can get involved and make a difference by becoming a member of an active organization that keeps you informed as a citizen to the threat you are facing and we are facing as a nation. American Congress for Truth, our organization, is dedicated to informing the American public. If you log on to the website, and I urge you to become a member, it doesn't cost you anything to become active and be involved. You will be receiving action alerts, emails regarding current situations, and what you can do to make a difference.
Thank you very much for being with us. You've shed a lot of light on something that a lot of people do need to be informed about, and I'm sure they have been during this interview today. We look forward to having you back on the web sometime. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.